How safe is hiking the Appalachian Trail? Earlier this week, I put up a video about the murders that have occurred on the Appalachian Trail. But when it comes to safety on trail, murder is really the least of your concerns. There are so many other safety precautions and safety topics that you need to think about if you're through hiking the Appalachian Trail that seriously, murder is just a tiny, tiny little piece of that. So to follow up with that, I wanted to make another video where I talk about all of the different aspects that can affect your safety on the Appalachian Trail and how truly safe the Appalachian Trail really is. Hey guys, if you don't know me, I'm Audrey, known as Glow Stick on Trail, and in 2018, I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. And now I live in Colorado where I hike and backpack all the time. So if you like learning about the AT or you're just interested in hiking and backpacking generally, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also check me out on Instagram at AudiePayne. Anyway, let's get into the things you need to think about in terms of safety on the Appalachian Trail. Because I just brought up murders, if you haven't already watched that video, I'm sure that you're curious about that. So I'll just quickly recap what I talked about in the murder video and then I'll move on from there. Since the Appalachian Trail was connected from Georgia to Maine in 1937, there have been a total of 13 murders on the Appalachian Trail. While not insignificant, and certainly you need to be aware of your surroundings and trust your intuition and take safety precautions and all of that, that number is actually not very alarming when you compare it to a city. For example, according to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, about 3 million people visit the Appalachian Trail every single year. And several thousand attempt through hikes of the Appalachian Trail every year. And yet there have only been 13 murders, which makes the AT pretty safe. Let's compare that to Chicago, which has a population of about 2.6 million. That was as close as I could get to 3 million in cities in the US. So we'll just use Chicago. In 2019, I'm using this year because I feel like 2020 was a weird outlier year with the pandemic and everything. And of course, 2021 numbers aren't out yet. But in 2019, there were 519 homicides in Chicago. So if you look at those numbers, 3 million people on the AT each year, 13 murders in like over decades, like 80 something years, versus Chicago, population of 2.6 million, 519 murders in one single year. So you see what I'm getting at here. But like I said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take precautions. You definitely should. You should keep in touch with friends and family back home. Let them know your progress on the trail and when they can expect to hear from you again. Camp at, campsites and shelters with other people so you're not necessarily alone if you're not feeling comfortable with that. Bring bear spray. Consider carrying a GPS device like a Garmin InReach Mini with an SOS button so that you can get in touch with search and rescue should something happen. And also, like I said, trust your intuition. If something feels off, it probably is. If you think a person is off or could potentially be dangerous, there's no reason that you should just try to be polite and stay around a situation where you don't feel comfortable. Always put yourself first. Put your comfort and safety ahead of someone else's feelings. Especially the ladies out there. Everyone, really, everyone, but especially the ladies. Okay, so that's what I have to say about the murders. If you want to learn more about them, go back and watch the other video I made. So let's move on to what people really think about next in terms of safety. That's probably wildlife, right? Maybe bears, perhaps? I feel like I always get a lot of questions about bears. On the entire AT, the whole 2,200 miles, I only saw a total of 3 bears. I did hear a lot of maybe bears in the night, probably bears, but if you've ever slept outside in a tent, you know that animals can sound a lot bigger when you're sleeping in your tent than they often really are. So I say maybe bears because there was never really any confirmation that these nighttime creatures were bears, but I'd be willing to wager a guess that some of them were. Anyway, I had no issues with bears on the trail, but that doesn't mean that no one will never have any issues with bears. So I'm gonna hit you with some more statistics. There are about 750,000 black bears in North America. Each year, they kill less than one person. Let's compare that to the murder rate in North America. In North America, statistically speaking, About 1 in 16,000 people commits a murder in North America each year. So if you're gonna take your chances with the people or the black bears, you probably wanna take your chances with the black bears. That being said, again, take precautions, properly store your food, get it away from camp, whether you're hanging it in a bear bag up in a tree, or you are using an sack, or you're using a bear canister. You wanna get that at least 200 to 300 feet away from camp, downwind if you can. Don't leave trash around the campsite. That can attract bears and other things like micro bears, mice, which can chew through your stuff. No one wants that. And if you encounter a bear, first of all, know that bears do not normally attack humans. And if they do, it's usually in self-defense because the human is too close to them, making them uncomfortable, or a human has gotten in between a mother bear and her cubs, which is a big no-no. Never do that. But if you do encounter a bear, take a detour around the bear if you can. Make sure that the bear knows you're there. Make yourself known by making yourself as big as possible, and talking to the bear in low, deep tones. Do not yell, do not scream. It could provoke the bear. You just want to let the bear know that you are there and you are human and you are not food. From there, you want to move sideways away from the bear, again, to take a detour around the bear. Bears do not see sideways movement as threatening. And just know that a bear could bluff charge you to try to scare you. A bear is probably not going to do that, but if they are feeling threatened, they could bluff charge you. So stand your ground. Do not give the bear access to your food. Do not drop your pack. And if a bear actually does attack you, which again is extremely rare, if a bear does attack you, fight back. And this goes, guys, I'm just talking about black bears because those are the only kinds of bears, aside from micro bears, on the Appalachian Trail. But if you can't remember all of that, most of what you need to know is just that you need to store your food properly away from camp and don't leave trash lying around to attract bears into campsites to potentially bother other people. And this is for the safety of both people and bears because problem bears are often put down and no one wants that either. Just let them be. Let them be in their forest, happy, frolicking, doing what they do, doing what bears do. Okay, other wildlife that you might need to worry about. Snakes. There are venomous snakes along the Appalachian Trail, like copperheads and rattlesnakes. So what you need to know is that, again, snake bites, not super common. To avoid a snake bite, number one, do not touch or disturb a snake for any reason. Even if you think it's dead, just leave it alone. Stay out of brush and tall grass. Make sure you're checking firewood before you're picking it up to make sure there are no snakes underneath it. And of course, watch where you step, which is easy on the AT because there are so many rocks and roots that you're constantly tripping over that you have to watch where you step, or you will not be stepping. You will be on the ground, falling over. And trust me on that because I took many a fall when I was hiking the AT. Okay, now let's talk about the wildlife that you actually have to worry about. That is actually very dangerous if you're hiking the AT, if you live in North America, especially in the Northeast. Can you guess what I'm talking about? Put it in the comments if you got it before I said it. Ticks, Lyme disease, tick-borne illness. This is the real bad stuff, I actually knew 3 people on my AT thru hike who got Lyme disease and had to be treated while on trail. One of those includes my friend Head Chef, who I did an interview with for my channel. And I forgot to ask him in the interview about his Lyme disease, which I was so upset about because I thought you guys would be really interested in hearing about it, but I forgot. So perhaps we can get him on the channel again at some point. But anyway, you need to watch out for tick bites because Lyme disease and other tick-borne illnesses are no joke. And Lyme disease, if it's not caught quickly and treated, can be incredibly debilitating. Like I personally have known people with chronic Lyme disease who have a whole host of health problems and chronic pain that you do not want, trust me. By the way, the CDC estimates that each year in the United States, 476,000 people are diagnosed and treated for Lyme disease. Compare that to the murder numbers, compare that to the bear numbers. That's huge. And that doesn't mean that all of these people have like sunken into debilitating illness by any means, because if you catch Lyme and treat it very early, then odds are you will be leading a completely normal life with no side effects. My friend Chef has actually had Lyme disease 3 times and he's totally fine, but it's been caught early each time. So one telltale sign of Lyme is having a huge bullseye rash, often on your back. But not everyone with Lyme ends up getting the bullseye rash. You're kind of lucky if you get it because it is so obvious that if you have this bullseye rash, then you probably have Lyme and then you know to go get treated. But that's not the only symptom. So make sure you look up the symptoms ahead of time, make sure you know what they are. And if you start having these symptoms, especially if you have found a tick on you, go to the doctor, get tested, get treated. Like, I know it's not super easy to go to the doctor while you're on trail, but a lot of the towns along the trail have urgent cares that you can go to and get tested, or at least get treatment for the Lyme if you are showing symptoms. I noticed on a couple of my friends, I actually saw it when they had the Lyme disease. They both turned like ashy white, started dropping weight. They were so tired and their joints hurt super badly. So Chef, we thought he maybe had Lyme disease for a few days, and then he said that his elbows started hurting, and he had never experienced his elbows hurting before, so he knew that he probably had Lyme disease and that something was definitely wrong. But anyway, there are a couple of ways that you can prevent yourself from getting it. Number 1 is to do tick checks every night. I used to do this with my friend Ibex every single night before we went to sleep. So first of all, I would check myself. And ticks like to hang out like in your hair, along your hairline, behind your ears, in your ears, along your like waistband, behind your knees, places like that. So I would check myself. I would like give myself a wipe down, check myself for ticks, make sure I didn't see any. And she would do the same. And then we would come together and then we would check each other's hair and hairlines and like in the ears and behind the ears, places that we couldn't see on ourselves. So I definitely recommend, if you have the option, get yourself a tick check buddy and do those tick checks every single night because you do not want Lyme. Just like the snakes, ticks love brush and tall grasses, so stay out of those areas when you can and make sure that you walk in the center of the trail to kind of stay away from those grasses and things that might be right on the side of the trail. You don't want to, be brushing your leg against those if you can help it, because you don't want any ticks latching on as you walk by. And finally, spray your stuff with permethrin ahead of time. I'll put a link down in the show notes to some permethrin if you don't know what it is, but it's basically this spray. I think it's considered an insecticide, but it's a spray that you can put on your boots, on your clothes, on your pack, possibly on your tent as well, depending. I know tent materials can be a little sensitive to things like that, but definitely your boots, your pack, your clothes, and you can even wash your clothes a few times and the permethrin will still work. But basically, it will keep ticks off of your things. It repels them. They don't want anything to do with it. So spray your stuff and try to keep those ticks away from you. And maybe you could put it on your sit pad as well if you have a sit pad, definitely on your socks. And permethrin doesn't last forever, so you are gonna wanna respray everything every few weeks. And typically you can get this at any outdoor store, and there are tons of outdoor stores along the AT, along the way. And it does tend to come in like a little bigger of a bottle, so I would definitely recommend buddying up with some trail friends and sharing a bottle amongst yourselves. Because you don't need a whole thing to yourself, and you're definitely not gonna wanna carry it out of town since it's liquid and it's heavy. So just buy a bottle, share among friends, somebody else can buy it the next time. Okay, since we're already talking about illness, let's continue on this path and talk about another common illness on the AT, and that's norovirus. If you're unfamiliar with norovirus, it's basically the stomach flu. So it's where you might get nauseous and vomit, you might get diarrhea. It's very unpleasant. It lasts for between like 12 and 48 hours, and it's spread very quickly, and it's pretty common on the AT because a lot of times on the AT, people end up in very close quarters, and obviously like you're out backpacking, your hygiene just can't be impeccable. It's impossible. You can do the best you can, and you could still end up with noro because people are, they're staying in shelters in very close quarters. They're staying in hostels in very close quarters. You're just meeting a lot of people on the AT all the time. And unfortunately, you just aren't able to like wash your hands all of the time. So You want to prevent noro because no one wants that to happen to them while they're out in the wilderness. I got it twice on the AT, and my hygiene was pretty darn good compared to a lot of other people. So it can happen to anyone. And it was very, very unpleasant. I spent one very terrible evening, nighttime, throwing up into Ziploc bags inside my tent, and then eventually sleeping on a privy floor. Thankfully, it was a very clean, very new privy, thank the Lord, but it was pouring down rain outside, and I just was so sick. I didn't have a choice. I had to be out there in that privy. It was an awful night, but I made it through. So do your best not to get noro. Ways that you can prevent this are obviously bringing along hand sanitizer, using it always before meals, using it after you touch things like the privy, obviously, like everyone knows to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. But anytime you touch any of the communal things in the shelter areas, like the log book, the picnic tables, anything like that, you want to use your hand sanitizer. Use soap whenever you get a chance to wash your hands with soap. Always do that. I think we all know about the hand washing rules from all of the pandemic stuff. And also, never reach into someone else's food bag and eat out of their food bag, and don't let anyone else reach into your food bag because you could be sharing germs back and forth and not knowing it. And also, don't share utensils. But I think most people aren't sharing utensils. It's more likely to be that, like, reaching into someone's food bag. But just how, if they're gonna share their snacks, just have them shake it out into your hand, instead of reaching in the bag. So no big deal. And then along those lines, obviously always filter/treat your water, whatever your method of treating it is, whether it is with a filter or it is boiling, or it is using iodine tablets or bleach or whatever. Just make sure you're always treating your water, because you never know what has been upstream, whether that be humans not following the proper human waste protocols, or animals, or something dead. You never know. Just make sure you treat your water. Even if the water looks so like crystal clear and clean, you just don't know what has happened upstream, so don't risk it. And by the way, ahead of my hike of the AT, I went to my doctor ahead of time and told her what I was doing to ask her for some tips and some prescriptions in advance of going. And she recommended I get a couple of shots. She sent me off with some antibiotics. She gave me some tips about how to keep myself healthy out there, like, again, washing your hands every chance that you get, basically. So I would also recommend that you guys do the same thing. Like, she gave me, for example, a prescription in case I ended up with Giardia. Thank God I never did, because I've had it before and it is not fun. But it might be a good idea, especially for those of you with health insurance before you go out there, that you might be losing your regular health insurance and just getting travel insurance, which doesn't cover prescriptions. So it might be a good idea to just go get some very basic things ahead of time from your doctor. That's my advice. Okay, next topic, injury. Injury is one of the #1 reasons that people end up getting off trail. I saw a lot of people injured out there. And some things you just can't prevent, like sometimes it's the luck of the draw. You trip and fall wrong or something like that. But a lot of things you can prevent, because the biggest injury that I saw out there, or the biggest injury type that I saw out there, was overuse injuries. So people trying to do too many miles too fast, not listening to their bodies and taking a rest when they needed it, not stretching. And these injuries were across all age groups, genders, etc. It's not specific to, you might think oh, the older people might be more prone to injury. No, it was young people too. So don't be like, I'm young, I'm invincible, I don't have to worry about that. Yes, you do. Yes, you do, because it could happen to anyone. I had some knee problems at the beginning of the trail, and I actually was ready to leave my trail family because I knew that I needed an extra day of rest, or my knees were not going to make it. And luckily they all decided an extra day of rest would do them good as well. But I think you really got to look out for yourself and not be on someone else's schedule. Like, if you need a rest, you need to take a rest. And remember to also stay hydrated, to stretch, and just listen to your body. And also, don't try to do too many miles right out the gate. Start slow, build up from there after your body gets used to it. Because, hiking up and down mountains all day, every day with a heavy pack on your back That is no joke on your body. So give yourself time to adjust to that and don't expect too much out of your body too fast. A thru hike is a marathon, not a sprint, unless you're an FKTer, but this video is not for you then. And along those lines, blisters are also something to watch out for and worry about. If you start feeling hot spots on your feet, you need to treat those right away and not wait until they become full-on blisters, because blisters actually can be really debilitating and can take a while to heal, especially when you're like out in the rain and sweating in your feet every single day. So once you start getting a hot spot, you want to treat that with like moleskin or duct tape or something that's specifically made for blisters. Like, don't wait until it becomes a real blister. And if it does become a real blister, make sure you're watching it for signs of infection, because you don't want infected feet, infected blood, any of that. So keep an eye out. Take good care of your feet because you need them. Okay, the final topic that I want to talk about is weather. Because you are hiking for so long in the AT, typically people spend between 5 to 7 months completing a thru hike of the AT. You are hiking through several seasons. And with these seasons come a lot of extremes in weather. You're hiking through freezing cold. You're hiking through sweltering heat. You're hiking through rain. You're hiking through snow. You're hiking through humidity. You're hiking through like sun and just all the things. So you need to be prepared for any kind of weather out there. And you might be thinking like, oh, it's the East Coast, like most people start in the South, it's gonna be warm there. Okay, I started on March 20th, and the first month of my hike, I was absolutely freezing. I was wearing literally all of my clothes to bed every single night, and I was like pretty well prepared and had a 0-degree sleeping bag. In addition to that, you will go through certain parts of the trail that are really known for extreme weather. For example, you'll go up and over Mount Washington in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and Mount Washington is known for having the worst weather in the world. It can go through extremes, like extremes. They can get snow any time of the year, even in the summer, incredibly strong winds. In fact, back in the 1930s, Mount Washington had the world's second highest wind speed ever recorded. So that has only been broken one other time, one other place in the world since Mount Washington set that record. It was 231 miles per hour, and it was in the month of April. The highest recorded wind speed in the month of August, which is when a lot of thru hikers are going through, is 147 miles per hour. That is no joke. So definitely do not underestimate the Appalachian Trail just because it doesn't have as high of mountains as some of the other trails. Like, still, there can be really harsh extreme weather that you end up hiking through or camping in. So you need to be prepared for all of that. Make sure that you bring sun protection. So that probably means a hat, sunscreen, maybe UV protected clothing. Bring rain layers like a raincoat and rain pants. Make sure you have moisture wicking clothing. So that means that the material is gonna pull moisture away from your skin. Whether it's raining or not, this is a good idea, because obviously when you're out there physically exerting yourself, you're gonna sweat. And you don't want that cold sweat sitting against your skin all day long. So make sure you are getting moisture wicking materials of clothing, and that means no cotton. You probably also want an insulating layer. I have a Patagonia Micro Puff hoodie, which I really like. It's a zip up insulating jacket, so it traps my heat inside me. And I'm always sure to put all of my clothes and my sleeping bag in dry bags so that if it rains and water gets into my pack, it's not going to get those things wet, which could really get dangerous really fast if you are dealing with a wet sleeping bag and clothes in freezing weather. You probably want at least a 20-degree sleeping bag, if not something even warmer than that. Like I said, I had a 0-degree sleeping bag and I was still cold. And you want to be making sure that you're paying attention to the weather, being aware of your surroundings. And if you do need to hunker down because of bad weather, I mean, that's a lot better. Like, take a break, set up your tent, take a break, whatever, instead of getting caught out in a storm that you're not equipped to handle. In terms of dealing with cold weather, you obviously want to look out for the signs of hypothermia, which can include shivering, exhaustion, memory loss, slurred speech, things like that. And if you do find yourself being really chilly, Okay, number one, every time I get to camp, I will immediately, when I get there, even if I'm exhausted, I will immediately set up my tent, my sleeping bag, all of that stuff. And then I'll change out of my wet, sweaty clothes for the day, because I know once I stop moving and generating heat, I can turn from hot to freezing cold really quickly. And I can remain freezing for a long time if I let myself get to that level. So don't let yourself get to that level. Make sure you have dry clothes for camp and you change into them right away once you get there. Also, if you are finding yourself really cold, you could have a hot drink like an herbal tea. I always bring some herbal tea bags along with me on hikes. They're super light, they're super small, and on those really freezing nights, it really goes a long way to have a hot drink. And then another trick is to have like a Nalgene or some other reusable water bottle that you can put boiling water into. Nalgenes can handle boiling water and they won't get damaged. So put some boiling water in there, make sure the lid is on very tight, and then take that to bed with me as sort of an old-fashioned, hot water bottle. In terms of the really hot days, obviously you want to stay hydrated. You can lose a lot of potassium and sodium when you're out sweating a ton, so maybe you want to bring some sports drinks, electrolyte mixes along with you on the trail. I think that's always a great idea in hot weather. And then if you're feeling really hot on a hike, go sit in the shade for a while. Don't be afraid to take a rest. If you have access to a cold spring, like splash yourself down, cool yourself off, put some, cold water on your headband if you have the opportunity to do that. And just, don't push yourself if it's not going to serve you. And look out for the signs of heat exhaustion, such as having cold, pale, wet skin, being nauseous, getting muscle cramps, things like that. You want to make sure that you are cooling yourself down somehow, again, by taking a rest, going to the shade, etc. So going back to the original question, how safe is hiking the Appalachian Trail? I don't mean to fearmonger. I also feel like I was doing a little fearmongering in the murder video, but truly the AT is a very safe place to be. And I think that most of these things, as long as you are prepared and you're paying attention to your surroundings and you're paying attention to how your body feels, there's really not a lot to worry about. You just have to take care of yourself out there, look after yourself, live the most healthy lifestyle that you can manage while backpacking a long trail like this, and you will be totally fine. And seriously, I found the AT to be such an incredible, magical experience, even while dealing with sore knees, even dealing with a little tendonitis in my ankles, even dealing with 3 illnesses while I was out there. I have an overactive immune system. That's not normal. So I don't want to scare you. I just want you to be aware of the safety topics that you maybe want to think about while you're out there, and do the best you can to keep yourself safe. So let me know if you have any questions about this specific subject, safety on the AT, or really any other questions about the AT, about backpacking, about hiking, about life in Colorado. Feel free to drop those down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, you guys. I'll have another video out soon, and I'll talk to you all later.